Vandeham Sri Guru Sri Jatapada Kamalam Sri Gurun Vaishnavangscha Sri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatam Vitang Tang Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Shri Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitangscha Om Jnana Timrandasya Jnananjana Salakaya Chaksurun Militam Jena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha Mukham Karati Vachalam Pangolong Hayate Girim Yat Kripatam Ahang Vande Sri Gurundina Tarinam Nindantam Pulakot Korena Bikasam Nipa Prasunachtrivim Prodrikritva Bujadvayam Hari Hari It Uchai Vedantam Muhu Nitrantam Drutamasrinir Jaya Jaya Chare Sinchantam Urvitalam Gayantam Nija Parasadaya Parivratam Sri Gaura Chandram Nama Ananda Lila Maya Vigrahaya Himabhadivyachtavi Sundaraya Tasmai Mahaprema Rasa Pradaya Chaitanya Chandraya Namo Namaste. Hare Krishna. Yes, Jonah, some question?
There is a question from our YouTube subscriber. He's asking, why can't people understand what the soul is?
That's the question?
Yes.
I thought Nityananda, there was another question.
Well, yeah, of course.
From Israel?
Yeah.
Okay, but so you have that one too.
Yes.
All right. Why can't people understand the soul?
Mm-hmm. What the soul is.
Yeah. It reminds me when Srila Guru Maharaj was perhaps in Badrinath and suffering from a migraine headache. And he could hear from the outside room a conversation, discussion, arguments between two about whether the soul exists, God exists, and one man making the case for another man saying, I doubt that God exists, I doubt that the soul exists. And overhearing this, then Guru Maharaj called for that man and he said to him, does the doubter exist? Right? Who doubts that God exists? Who doubts that the soul exists? Does the doubter exist? So the answer should be obvious. Then what is the nature of this doubter? What are the qualities, characteristics of who can possess doubts or belief for that matter? Right. So in the Bhagavad Gita, in the early part, in the second chapter, Krishna is speaking on Atma Gyan, or Atma Tattva, the knowledge of the soul, the subject of soul. And he's giving various examples that are within our experience. And it's equated to identity. But we know you can misconceive your identity, or you can properly conceive. We say self-actualization, self-realization is about properly conceiving your identity, right? And subsequent self-determination. But I find it interesting that you could give some very complicated arguments or descriptions, one could, and certainly Krishna could, right? He's the omniscient, omnipotent personality of Godhead. He could give the most sophisticated, complex argument for the existence of the soul beyond our imagination. And we hear from Vedic literature, Vedanti tat vavidas tattvam yajnanam advayam, this advaya gyan, this one thing that is to be known, has three aspects: Brahman, Paramatma, Bhagavan. And as his Paramatma feature, he's within everyone. So you could say that gives him a unique advantage in marketing the soul concept to people, right? In that he's like, when people are marketing something, they have the so-called focus group. Like they assemble a group of people, usually in a hotel conference room, and they run some ideas by them, and they see how they respond to that. It's a particular type of marketing. And on the basis of that, they may modify their approach. Right? Which is not the Steve Jobs method. His method, he's saying, people don't know what they want until you tell them and show it to them. So that's another way. That's another, it has merit as well. But on this, I'm making the point that, so they're trying to understand how these people respond, just like on the internet, social networking, on the basis of choices we've made, or likes, dislikes, etc. There's a profile. There's a profile beyond what you said about yourself, right? Because we know everyone's profile is entirely honest and objective. But they know by your selections, your likes, dislikes, shares, etc., they're developing a profile of that particular user, and then suggesting things that you might find interesting or appealing. Right? But what if you were, instead of just taking that, objective aspect to try and understand that subjective self, you were actually inside that person, right? And you knew all of their thoughts, and they may not even be having an honest relationship with themselves, what to speak of others. So you may know more, have a more realistic assessment of who they are than they do. Right? And what if, not only in this lifetime or at this time, but you knew them their last life, the one before that, the one before that. Right? So Krishna tells Arjuna, when Arjuna is surprised, Krishna says, Imam bivasvate yogam proktavan aham abhyam vivasvan manave praha manur iks bhagave bravit evam parampara praptam imam rajasha vidu. So he's saying, I instructed this science of karma yoga to the sun god. And he did to his son, Ikshaku, and this parampara, a disciplic line came from there. In the course of time, yogo nashta parantapa, the link was broken. Now there's some necessity for reestablishment. And Arjuna is astonished to hear that. He's thinking, that was like over 100 million years ago. And you're saying you instructed the sun god. Yeah. And Krishna says, Bahuni me vyatitani janmani tavacharjana. Arjuna, many births or appearances, incarnations you and I have had. I remember all of them and you don't. And not only do I remember all of mine, I know all of yours. Right? So we come back to this infinite perspective and finite perspective. Right? it is in the interest of the finite to adopt infinite perspective. We can't imagine how that will enhance our position. We're always trying to do that. Pratyaksha, paroksha, aparoksha, adhoksaja, aprakrita. Pratyaksha, our direct experience, right? And we realize the limitations of that, right? In very common ways or in very uncommon ways. Sometimes you just ask someone who's nearby if they can see something you can't see. That's like it in its very simplest form. Other times we're searching, going on the internet. We want search results. And what do you see? No one really looks anymore, but if you look casually, the real small print says, 140 million results. Usually you want to see like 5, maybe 10, maybe more. But it'll say so-and-so million responses to what you've asked. So then you can think, well, that could really broaden my view of things. But other than a robot, a human being cannot go through 1 million or 10 million search results and put them all together and draw some conclusion from that. We usually take the first one or one of the first few. And even then they find people, they take the one that is most recent, thinking that somehow that's more valid than one that was a year ago, 2 years ago, or 3 years ago. And on a note on that is, sometimes we'll hear people say, there was a certain amount of knowledge up till like the 19th century. And then the Industrial Revolution, and then the internet and all. So they're saying, but in time, the sum total of what we know, like it was a small amount discovered recently, and most of it from long before. But as things have evolved, and especially with computing, you say now the sum total of what we know, say 50% we learned in the last 25. And if you keep following this sort of analysis, you could take it to an absurd degree. You could say, like 99% of what we know we discovered in the last 5 minutes. Something seems wrong with that. That may be, data analysis, data mining, but know and knowledge, still. So that's pratyaksha, direct experience. Paroksha means what is seen by others, which is beyond our experience. So we ask others, or we do computer searches, and that are not only of now, but let's say of all time. What do you call inherited knowledge, inherited wisdom? That when they talk about the great questions that people have been thinking about for centuries or thousands of years. Accumulated human wisdom. And then there are others who say, actually all of this sort of input, sensory input, is not only coloring your experience, but making it opaque and unclear. If you want to really understand the self, you need to cleanse yourself of direct experience and collective experience. It's misinforming you, right? And we could make a case for that. As Guru Maharaj says, the sum total of the finite is never equal to the infinite. So if we were interested in getting knowledge of the infinite, that would not be helpful. So they say if you cleanse yourself, like tabula rasa, a clean slate, then you'll have a clear view of yourself and reality, the way things are. Right? That's 3. But the 4th plane of the Vaishnavas, called Adhoksaja, they're saying, as Guru Maharaj will say, if the infinite wants to make itself known to the finite, then it can be known. Right? As the man challenged him, saying, if the finite can know the infinite, it's not infinite. It's just maybe a very expansive concept of finite, but not infinite. And Guru Maharaj answered, yes, but if the infinite cannot make itself known to the finite, it's not infinite. It must have that capacity for self-revelation. Right? So adhoksaja, and you see in each one of these, aksha is there. Aksha means eyes or seeing. So pratyaksha, direct experience, paroksha, para-aksha, seen, or not by you, but by others. Aparoksha, wipe it, cleanse yourself of all of this prejudice, the acquired prejudice of experiencing the objective world. But here we had adha aksaja, that the infinite making itself known to the finite, it's revealing itself, and when the infinite comes down, the world of mundane sense experience, adha, means it's kept down, it's in abeyance for this divine experience. And what does Bhaktivinoda Thakur compare it to? Lightning, that moment where there's a lightning, when they're in darkness and there's a lightning flash, momentarily everything is revealed. And then he says, and if you try to fix that, it vanishes. Just a momentary flash of illumination and revelation. But that leaves one in a hankering position. So that's adhoksaja, which Guru Maharaj says is the southern hemisphere of the Vaikuntha world. And then what is in the highest position? Aprakrita, means like the mundane, but not. Krishnera jateka kela sarvatam naralila narvaputara swarup gopavesh venukar navakishore natabar naralila hoyanurup. What happened to the clock? The human-like pastimes of the infinite. The central conception of the infinite is, whereas the extremes, Brahman and Brahman, all accommodating, greater than the greatest, everything fits within that. So incidentally, it seems to harmonize or include all different types of philosophy or theistic systems. And smaller than the smallest, these are the extremes of the infinite. Greater than the great, then the other direction, smaller than the smallest, all permeating Paramatma. Right? But as Guru Maharaj will pose the question, what is the central conception of the infinite? Is human-like. So in this beauty, charm, sweetness, how one's all accommodating, one's all permeating, and what's Krishna conception? All attractive. What a leap. From all accommodating to all permeating to irresistible, beautiful. So beautiful that you're irresistibly drawn towards the absolute center, the human-like persona and pastimes of the personality of Godhead, and as opposed to in the world of exploitation, wanting to consume that very thing as an object of consumption, the response is bhajaniya sarvasat guna vishishta. Jiva Goswami said, you're so irresistibly, you want to offer yourself in service. You want to dedicate yourself, not to exploit, not to consume, not to control, but to offer oneself in service. And what are the extremes of that? Self-forgetfulness. As Guru Maharaj, so one level self-sacrifice, still some concept of self, but self-forgetfulness, self-oblivion means so wholly given over to the other, yet retaining one's identity and one's individuality. So now, all these things taken into consider, when Krishna gives an example, I believe it's a very good one. You could give so many examples, but just think about it. If he gives a particular example, he must have some concept of it landing, right, or being received. And we see that although he's omniscient, and so many dense, almost impenetrable philosophical works are written about Krishna, even the most remote aspect of Krishna, that when he himself gives an example, it's very simple, that anyone could understand. Practically a child could understand. So when he says, Dehi nosmen yata dehe ko maram yovanam jara, tata dehantara prapti dhiras tatra namuyati. He's saying, as the soul, that means the conscious self, is in an embryonic body, and then in the body of a baby, a toddler, a child, a teenager, a young adult, an adult, then middle age, old age. There is this one constant identity that is enabled, that doubter or believer, the believer or doubter is able to sustain all these different bodily changes and retain a particular identity. That's the point he's making. It doesn't dismiss the possibility or growth or development, but the core identity remains the same from the embryonic position into the baby, toddler, child, teenager, adult, and into old age. And then he adds, so he's saying, if you can, this is something that is within your experience, the so-called change of bodies. If he didn't tell it in this way, it would be something beyond your experience. But this is something that we're experiencing. Just as we know through photography, the, what do you call it? You know, like when you show a flower bloom in 60 seconds. Time lapse. Right? If we did a time lapse of ourselves, and sometimes they do this, but or people, they take a picture every year on the same day. There are many things like this on the internet, and then you see the person sort of grow and develop, but it's the same person. Their same core identity is there. So that's the example he gives. And then he adds something that we may feel is beyond our experience. He says, so in a similar way, you'll have another transition at the time of death. Right? And that'll be based upon yam yam vapi smaram bhavam chajachante kalevaram. Whatever uses the word bhav, interestingly. Well, you can say consciousness, but bhav, more to the point, means your heart, which in the words of the poet is the deep heart's core. Right? That's the consciousness, deep heart's core. Because we're not talking about the physical heart. What that is will determine the body that is generated. Right? The body being the biological expression of the soul's delusion. Right? So, once a friend of mine said, because Srila Sridhar Maharaj has this extraordinary ability to explain things, he said, would you ask him to give this basic knowledge of the soul? And that would be great, then we can publish that and convince so many people. And when I presented this idea to Srila Guru Maharaj, he said, it is a question of faith. He said, if someone has no faith, you could present a mountain of evidence and they won't accept it. It won't touch them. It won't reach them. And he said, whereas if someone has some basic faith, then given a simple explanation, they'll get it. And then I thought, oh, like Krishna does in the 2nd chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. He gives a series of very relatable examples that are within everyone's experience. Another one, vasamsi jirnani yata vihaya, when you have a garment or a coat, a dress, a shirt, whatever it might be, and it becomes old and worn out, you toss it and get a new one. Very simple. And like Guru Maharaj said, if there's some faith, then there'll be acceptance. And if not, it doesn't matter how you explain it, what sort of type of explanation you give, what sort of evidence, it won't be accepted. So, which reminds me of our good friend Salvador Dali. When we know he's eccentric, abstract artist, surrealist, actually not abstract, but and an unpredictable character, and was asked if he believed in God. He said, Dali, do you believe in God? And everyone expected that he would say no. I said, Dali, do you believe in God? He said, yes, but I have no faith. And I thought, that's a great answer. It's honest. Intuitively, there's belief in God, there's belief in the soul. You have some sense of what that is, of the beneath the layers of what Guru Maharaj calls acquired prejudice and acquired tendency. And what I told, the biological expression of the soul's delusion manifested as the body, manu. I'm talking about dress, karmic dress. How do you say? Tamasa bahurupena veshtita karma hetuna. All these different life forms you see, bahurupena, all these different forms, what are there? Veshtita karma hetuna. Karma is the cause. So we're wearing our karmic dress. So, what was the point I was going to say? Huh?
Salvador Dali.
Dali, oh, and faith. So, huh? Yes, but there was another particular thing I wanted to say, but it will come. So, about intuitively, we have some sense of this. That's what I was saying. Whether atheist, theist, agnostic, there is some sense about our core identity, and we could say consciousness is the symptom of the soul's presence. Can you ask the other question?
Yes, there is a question from Gupta Gordhan.
No, ask the one from Israel.
Not for today, Maharaj.
Okay.
There is
I'll ask what it was.
Mm-hmm.
Someone was asking that about the conception of Krishna being merciful or not merciful in some instances, and about living beings, how free we are to actually participate in Krishna's divine pastimes or the pastimes within this world, and how is it said, and that Krishna, he is so attractive, he attracts us to him, and we submit ourselves to Him, and then He gives us the inspiration to act or behave in a particular way. So it was really on the subject of whether or not we are free. And what is the position of Krishna? And we have to say this. In the Gita, it's mentioned, Mameva angsa jiva loke jiva bhuta sanatana. He says, the jiva souls are my angshas, my parts. Right? So examples are given, like the sun and the sun ray. So that means, in this context, as Krishna is independent and possesses free will, then those who are, made in the image and likeness of God, who are His parts and parcels, they also have free will. The difference is in magnitude. He's the independent, absolute. He has the absolute magnitude of freedom, and ours is very limited and minute. But it's there. And but you could say that having free will in some instances is perceived as a burden, because that's the burden of choosing, of making choices. And Guru Maharaj would quote Gandhi when the British told Gandhi and the Indians, you can't have independence because you might misuse your freedom. Guru Maharaj said, Gandhi's response was, freedom means the right to do wrong. Not just to do the right thing, it includes it's the right to do wrong. They were saying, no, you can't have it because you might do wrong. You're saying, no, that's the very nature of it. That possibility must be there. So as compelling as Krishna is, the all-attractive personality of Godhead that we alluded to before, the central conception of the infinite, still that attraction has to be voluntary. It may come in the form of certain types of inspiration or conscience, but still it must be voluntary. When I mentioned before about Paramatma, the localized aspect, the supersoul, in the Gita says, Upadrasthana mantacha bharta bhokta maheshara paramatmeti chapayukto dehesman purusha para. Saying the Paramatma, Upadrashta, means overseer, and who is what? Passive and non-judgmental, non-interfering, accompanying but not interfering. If Krishna, and in this context through Paramatma, were controlling every aspect of us, including what we decide or what we don't, what we choose or choose not to do, then we would have no free will. We would be no different than stone. Right? So consciousness, back to the soul, consciousness implies freedom. Right? Take away consciousness, no freedom. Give consciousness, then there must be freedom. And freedom means to choose. Sometimes Guru Maharaj would reference Milton's Paradise Lost, to just express it simply. He calls it the Satanic mania, where Satan, the option is given. Would you rather, serve in heaven or reign in hell? And for those with English as a second language, this reign is R-E-I-G-N, means to be king or queen of. Because someone told me recently, said, what, reigning in hell, how does that work? It's very hot rain. So That's the satanic mania, that jivas, tatastha shakti, on the outskirts of the chit shakti, situated at the margin, the tata, between the, when we say spiritual material world, we remember it's all consciousness. Even this is ultimately all, the whole objective world is like an iceberg floating in consciousness. So it's all consciousness, right? Not to be understood like, cartography in the mundane sense of the way we understand objective location. It's all about consciousness. So situated at the margin, that's where there can be this choice. Right? Some souls going, they're resonating from the onset of their existence with serve in heaven. Others, how do you say, the prospect of fulfillment through reigning in hell. Now sometimes devotees or aspiring devotees, they would say, well, gee, if I knew when I knew now, it doesn't seem fair. If I knew what I knew now, I would have never made that choice. Which sounds like a good argument until you realize with what you know now, you still make these choices, if you're honest. With what we know now about Krishna consciousness and the potential and all these things, we still choose Maya. So the argument that if I knew now if I knew then what I knew now, I wouldn't have ever done that, doesn't ring sincere. But it's about a sense of prospect. That's what Guru Maharaj puts it at. The sense of prospect that one plays through, acquiring, controlling, and consuming things which are lower than us will bring us fulfillment and self-satisfaction. And on the other side, offering ourselves in service or dedication to something higher as a means of self-fulfillment, self-determination. So, then enters the aspect or concept of how merciful is Krishna. Krishna is never merciless. There are no examples of Krishna being merciless. In fact, the only people who ever accuse Krishna of being merciless are the Braja Gopis in the depths of separation. And that's another perspective. They're just saying, why, you have innumerable avatars in which you descend into this world to rescue the fallen souls who made those poor choices. How many avatars? As innumerable as the waves of the ocean. Infinite. Because we think like, wow, hasn't it been a while? Right? As innumerable as the waves of the ocean. That's how many. You find this in Chaitanya Charitamritam and in Srimad Bhagavatam. And besides that, what we mentioned earlier, expanded into the heart of every living being. What does it say? Dva, Suparna, Sayuja, Sakaya. Like two birds, the tree is the tree of karma, the body, and the two birds are like the soul and the super soul. And the soul, we're told, is eating the fruits of the tree of karma, and the super soul is accompanying, non-judgmental, not interfering. Everyone should be so fortunate to have some close companion like that. The super, non-judgmental, non-interfering. And actually, Prabhupada once said, we think as aspiring servitors that periodically there may be some little inspiration coming from the upper world or from the divine. And Srila Prabhupada said, actually, it's coming at every moment. Only sometimes we're receptive to it. There's always, an incessant mercy signal, you could say, coming to everyone. So as the Paramatma accompanying everyone in innumerable incarnations to rescue the fallen souls. Then when things are at their worst, what is his response? To become more merciful, or the most merciful, as Namo Mahavaranaya Krishna Prema Pradayate, Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namne Gaur Trishe Namaha, Mahaprabhu, to gift the highest thing of which there is nothing higher to those who are the fallen, people of Kali Yuga, nothing lower. And we see in Krishna Lila, this is a mention in the Bhagavatam, that perhaps in the 7th canto, around Prahlad section where Jai and Vijay are going to be discussed, and it's mentioned there all the different ways that people became absorbed in thinking of Krishna and reaped the benefit of that. I think, oh, you mean like the great yogis meditating? That's one. But two very interesting examples are given there. One is, as it says, Kama, Esha, I forget the word, for hatred. In the case of Shishupal, his was hated Krishna so much that he couldn't stop thinking about him. That happens to people in this world. They're so obsessed with disliking someone or hating, they're just thinking about, they go to sleep thinking about, wake up thinking about, So we're told, Shishupal, like Prahlad, when he was a child, when he went to school, the alphabet, the recitation of the alphabet would put him in ecstasy. Because in Sanskrit it goes, ka ka ga ga na. So when he go, ka, he'd go, Krishna, and like faint. He'd say, Krishna, ka, Krishna, and Prahlad, they have to. Then we get to ga, Govinda. Like he couldn't make it through the alphabet, like a Jiva Goswami, Harinam, Vyakaran type. Whereas we're told Shishupal, parents are always very excited when the baby says like the first words. And they say, the first words out of Shishupal's mouth was blasphemy of Krishna. If you thought like, well, you couldn't write it any better than that. Well, Krishna Lila is cast and scripted by Yogamaya and Baladev to create this sort of emotional intensity. And we're talking about divine emotions. Okay. Lila means play. Right? And if we just think, oh, play, then we don't have to take it seriously. No, we see in this world, in a play, movie, acting, when they're really good, and we'll say this as viewers, you forget this world and you enter that world and you believe everything you're seeing. It's intense. It's more intense than real life. Like when in suspense, someone's walking upstairs and they're going to open this door. Right? It can be, you're shaking. It's an anticipation. Right? So this play, story, the visuals you're seeing and the accompanying audio is putting you in a sort of, deep emotional state. And that's with mundane things. So the Krishna Lila is having that effect upon whom? The soul. Penetrating the layers of acquired prejudice and acquired tendency, awakening the soul plane. That's who resonates with Krishna Lila. That's why we were telling you, we like the children to hear like Kaliya Lila, and like is a story to this day, is one of my favorite pastimes to hear, but it's equally relishable by children. Right? and many other things. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, incidentally, the safe pastimes are Krishna's childhood pastimes and the pastimes of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So that intensity there in this foe, Shishupal, who we find out in that section is actually, because they're talking about Jai and Vijay, the gatekeepers of Vaikuntha, who insulted the four Kumaras, and they were cursed to come into this world, and they chose 3 births. So they were Hiranyaksha, Hiranyakashipu, great demons. If a king wants to spar, like box, who do they pick? But one of his part of his entourage. That's who can fight with the king. And he wants to give the king a good fight. Right? Like that. So if someone's going to be an enemy in Krishna Lila, it's from his own group, Parsadas. So anyway, Hiranyaksha, Hiranyakashipu, and Kumbhakarna, and Ravana, right? And Dantavakra and Shishupal. And incidentally, later we're told Jagai and Madhai in Chaitanya Lila. So always playing this role. And we know, again, there are many actors and actresses, they say they always play the good guy or good girl, and then they say, I really would like to play someone evil, go against the way I'm normally perceived, or play a part where I die. Like everyone wants to have one time where they die. They get to do that on camera. So imagine, in Krishna Lila, someone's going to play the role of somebody who's really evil and disrupting the pastimes of Krishna. And what will that do? Make them more intense. Just like we heard on Aristasura, they're right about to have Rasa Lila, and he shows up and disrupts not only pastimes, the Rasa Lila, right, is put on hold until he's dealt with, and the subsequent Shyamakund, Radhakund, etc. Then, when there is Rasa Lila, it will be with increased intensity and ecstasy. Anandamayo Vyasat, Krishna, who's the Abhigya Swarat, totally omniscient and independent, knows everything. He exists, as Guru Maharaj says in Hegelian terms, for himself and by himself. And that means, I guess we're left out. No, we're part of him. Mame Valangsa Jiva Loke. So, for himself and by himself, well, what is he all about? Anandamayo Vyasat. He's by nature full of ecstasy, anandam, sundaranandam, ecstasy and beauty. That's what he's about. And he exists for the extension, promotion, and expansion of love, beauty, charm, and sweetness. And we're so foolish to think like, what's in it for me? And to address that point, I had to think seriously, even under the best circumstances, as a finite person, what could we hope to contribute to the infinite? It seems preposterous, right? As if we had something to offer. Right? But in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Srila Rupa Goswami is saying, Klesha Agni Subhada Moksha Laguta Krit Sandra Ananda Visheshatma Sri Krishna Karshini Chasa. The qualities, characteristics of pure devotion, concluding with Sri Krishna Karshini Chasa. Wait a minute, Krishna, Akarshan, Krishna means who's, magnetically drawing everyone towards the center on account of his beauty, charm, sweetness, love, and affection. And we're told he is irresistibly drawn to a drop of Krishna bhakti in the heart of even a finite being. And as Guru Maharaj said, and that is proof positive, where there is devotion, where the infinite comes under the control of the finite. That's how powerful love is. Love and prem, and it's the same. There's not like mundane love, and really this is it. The result. It is the most powerful. It can make the infinite come under the control of the finite. I think, well, how is that? I mean, that just doesn't sound, good, maybe. Like, if you knew the finite like I know the finite, do we want that? Then Gromers, who are wholly one in interest. As I mentioned earlier, self-oblivion, but not self-extinction. Self-forgetfulness, so wholly given over to the other as to be totally one with each other while retaining your identity. Only such a person can be and have the infinite come under their control. Like Yashoda. Right? She or the elderly gopis, sometimes when Krishna's a toddler child, and they tell him to bring things for them. Right? So he has to pick them up and give them to them. Right? Even peacocks approach Krishna. They're devotees. They approach Krishna and ask him to play the flute so they can dance. They start playing the flute. They're dancing madly in ecstasy. The flute song, we know, is so inconceivably beautiful. And at the end, the peacocks bow their heads. Krishna plucks a peacock feather, puts it in his hair, and the peacocks are happy. Look, he wears, our feather in his hair. That's our Krishna. And the Lord becomes like a plaything in the hands of the devotees, the inconceivable of inconceivable things. Ahang bhakta paradino yasvan tantra eva dvija sarubir drasbarshta hridayo bhakta bhakta janapriya. Just like these little children who were just here, they're so cute, you want to give yourself to them. And we can see the child, right, so finite, say there's a little girl, her father could be the head of the nation, he could be the president of the universe. And she said, I want to ride the horsey. And then he gets down on all fours, his daughter climbs on his back and rides him like a horse. That's how it's possible. Because he's melted by the love and affection that's in the heart of his child. It's that powerful. It's a greater power than powers that's conventionally received. That's why we tell beauty over power. Guru Maharaj's one of his themes. The ultimate controlling principle is beauty. And that's what's at the heart of Krishna conception. So we're told in the case of Shishupal, hated Krishna, always thinking of him. He gets liberation from that. It seems like, hate yoga. I'm almost wish I didn't say that. It'll be trending, That's what you get a bunch of women together, gonna have hate yoga. But on the other side, then Kama, the gopis, the gopis' Kam is prem. I mean, their so-called lust for this teenage boy Krishna is really prem. Right? But it resembles lust. So by thinking of him in this way, they, in essence, achieve their position. So what to speak of that when Uddhava and Maitreya, I believe, in the third canto, and revisited in the pastimes of Pundarik Vidyanidhi and Gadadhar Pandit. Uddhava is asked to say something about Krishna. He becomes so overwhelmed in remembrance of Krishna, that he leaves this world. His body's just somehow still there in an ecstatic trance state. And he's in the upper world, the inner world. And when he comes back, he says, Aho bhakiyam stanakalakutam jigam sayapaya apyasadvi lebhe gatim datri uchitam tutonyam kamba dayalum sharanam brajema. He said, who is a more merciful Lord than Krishna, that he liberates his enemies? And he's saying, Putana, Rakshasi, means like an evil sorceress. They can take different forms, sent by Kamsa to kill the baby Krishna. She takes on the form of this beautiful young girl who can nurse babies. And she looks so sweet and beautiful. We're told Yashoda and Rohini, or having Krishna's mother and aunt or other mother, they're having a conversation, and they see, and they go like, she goes, can I see the baby? Oh yeah, in there. She looks so sweet that she fooled them. So they send her to Krishna, and she puts Krishna on her lap, and her breast is anointed with poison, the nipple. She pushes the nipple into Krishna's mouth, and he starts sucking the nipple. He sucks the poison, then the milk, then her pran, her life air, and she's like losing. She's trying to push him off, and then her form starts expanding. There were, many miles in size, and she falls over backwards, screaming, right, and drops dead. And Krishna's cushioned on the breast from the fall. And Nanda, Yashoda, they all come running, and they're thinking, oh, we're so fortunate. We must be pious people who did something, wonderful in our last lives, because if she'd fallen forward, she would have crushed the baby. But instead, she fell backwards, and that softened the blow when he landed. How fortunate we are. That's Jnana Shunya Bhaktas. Right? Jnana Shunya Bhakta means through seva, through heart, seva with heart, you cross over Gyan, the plane of Gyan. No necessity for it. Right? That maybe they're in a madhyam stage of they just go beyond that through heart. So Guru Maharaj said, by serving a Mahabhagavata, a third-class devotee can bypass the second-class stage, because they've entered the plane of heart of love and affection. So Uddhava says, if Putana, Rakshasi, approached him with murderous intentions, but what did he do? He just accepted the motherly gesture. Right? And we're told she was liberated, elevated to a mother-like position. Right? He's saying, so if that's how he treats his enemies, then what to speak of his friends? Then it would be inconceivable. That's what, if you get liberation for that, then what would be the outcome, the reciprocation for those friends of his? And Vishwanath Chakrabarti Thakur says that he parses it by saying, so that's the murderous attentions approach. Then Shanta would deliver something superior to that, And then Dasya, Sakya, Vatsalya, he's showing gradations of inconceivableness. So Guru Maharaj says, when he first heard about Jnana Shunya Bhakti and that plane, as I told the other day, he said, Krishna likes to surround himself with ignorant people. And we're thinking, what? I thought only the highest section of liberated souls can be there. He means Jnana Shunya Bhaktas. Their heart has eclipsed the majestic aspect of knowledge and understanding of Krishna. It's receded, it's in the background, right? It's subservient to heart, eclipsed, so that they can actually deal with him individually, personally, one-on-one. So Guru Maharaj, who was a Bhattacharya Brahmin, studying Vedas as a boy, and this extraordinary capacity for extraction from Veda, Purana, etc. When he heard about Jnana Shunya Bhakti, he said, it was like a hammer hitting me on the head. Like, right? Which is also a perfect example, because Gyan, the head, like, a hammer on my head. Right? He's saying, the gopis, they're not scholars. But no one has superior heart to them. Aradhya Bhagavan Brajesha Tanayas Tadama Vrindavanam Ramya Kachir Upasana Brajabadu Bargena Jalkalpitai. Mahaprabhu is worshipping the Braja Gopis. Right? They are superior in self-giving and self-oblivion, self-forgetfulness, and offering themselves to Krishna irresistibly. Right? So, but I once said to Guru Maharaj in line of, I was thinking, Saraswati Thakur said, Sridhara Sakalam Beti, Sridhar knows everything, and Guru Maharaj is always explaining so many things, and I said, you're like in a little teasing way, I said, you're always talking about Jnana Shunya Bhakti, knowledge-free devotion. I said, but Maharaj, Sridhara Sakalam Beti, you know everything. And Guru Maharaj was like, like he was caught. And then he said, when knowledge comes to serve devotion, then it's in its rightful position. I went, aha. That's when it reveals its value. And when it comes to serve devotion. Right? Hare Krishna. So that's why Mahaprabhu, that first verse he accepted in Ramananda Samvad, Jnane Prayasamudapasana Mateva. Stop trying to measure him with your mind. And, I mentioned William Blake, mystic William Blake, his picture has a person called Urizen, is his name. And he has a compass, and he's like under the water in the ocean, and he's like trying to measure the universe. He says, Jnane Prayasamudapasana Mateva, Brahma with his 4 heads. He's saying, Janantu eva janantu, Kim bahukta name prabhu. I don't have much to say after his Brahma Vimohan, lila, pastimes of Krishna. He said, I don't have much to say on this subject matter about the infinite. It is better just to hear about him from his devotees, Krishna-loving people, and that will awaken your hearts, the Jnana Shunya, knowledge-free devotion of the heart, by hearing from the Krishna-loving devotees. As given by Uddhava. So when we hear that, and then again from Pundarik Vidyanidhi, this sort of volcanic eruption of heart, at being astonished at the magnitude, the infinite magnitude of Krishna's mercy, gives us all hope. Hare Krishna. Hari Haraya Namo Krishna Yadavaya Namo. Hari Haraya Namo Krishna Yadavaya Namo. Yadavaya Madhavaya Keshavaya Namo. Gopal Govinda Ram Sri Madhusudan. Giridhari Gopinath Madana Mohan. Shri Chaitanya Nityananda Shri Advaita Chandra Garadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Jai Rupa Sanatan Bhatta Raghunath Sri Jiva Gopala Bhatta Dasa Raghunath Echai Gochai Kori Charana Bandhan Jaha Hoite Vignanas Avista Puran Echai Gochai Jar Mui Taro Das Kansabara Padarenu Moda Panchakras Tandera Charana Sevi Bhakta Sanevas Janome More Abhilas Echai Gochai Jabe Braje Koilovas Radha Krishna Nitya Lila Korilo Prakash O Anande Bolo Hari Bhaja Vrindavan Sri Guru Vaishnava Pade Majai Aman Sri Guru Vaishnava Pad Padma Koriyas Harinam Sankirtan Koe Narottamada Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare 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 Rama, Rama Rama, Hare 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 Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare 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 Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare Nitai Gaur Hari Bo, Hari Bo, Hari Bo, Gaur Hari Bo Nitai Gaur Hari Bo, Hari Bo, Hari Bo, Gaur Hari Bo Gaur Hari Bo Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Parivrajaka Satara Sadhu Sri Srimad Srila Bhakti Sudhir Govinda Dev Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai Jai Om Vishnupad Srila Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Dev Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai Bhagavan Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Ki Jai Jai Saparikar Sri Sri Guru Gauranga Gandharva Govinda Sundar Jiu Ki Jai Sri Giriraj Govardhan Ki Jai Sri Rupanuga Guru Varga Ki Jai Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Go Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai Sri Sri Radha Krishna Gop Gopinath Shyama Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai Navadip Dham Ki Jai Sri Chaitanya Saraswat Mat Ki Jai Sri Gupta Govardhan Ki Jai Ganga Devi Jamuna Devi Bhakti Devi Tulsi Devi Ki Jai Om Vishnupad Vishvavarenya Srilesi Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada ki jai. Sri Chaitanya Saraswat Mat Acharya Vrinda ki jai. Jai Srila Bhakti Vinod Maharaj ki jai. Jai Srila Bhakti Ranjan Madhusudana Maharaj ki jai. Jai Sri Bhakti Lalita Devi Dasi ki jai. Seva Vrinda ki jai. Samaveda Bhakti Vrinda ki jai. Nitai Go Premanande.
Sudhir Goswami Maharaj ki jai.
Hare
And
Krishna.
Maharaj,
Yes.
that's from Samantha Fairclough, Suchitra Didi, Madhava Priya Didi, Raseshwari Didi, Lila Sundari Didi, Australia, Vijay Krishna Prabhu, London, Tapana Nandini Didi, Seva Rupa Didi, Mexico, Kalyani Didi, USA, Ashapurna Didi, Salt Lake City, Banavi Didi, Jai Krishna Prabhu, Yulia Chimihina, it's from Moscow, and Bhaktilata Didi from Moscow, and Lila Sundar Prabhu from Ukraine,
Yes.
Dhanjay Prabhu,
Got
yeah,
Brahmachari.
oh yeah,
Saffron cloth today.
wow.
Thank you.
Dhanjay Prabhu, Russia, Chris Jonathan Bulavan Gore, Prema Rupa Devidasi, Aravinda Lochandas, and Rasananda Prabhu from Sochi.
Hare Krishna. Dandavad. And Dandavad to these devotees here. They have Sulalita and Orsk. Dandavad, Didi, Dandavad. She's our group leader there. So many nice souls. Sri Haridas in Brazil. Dandavad Prabhu. Sushmita Devi in China. Dandavad. Hare It really looks like she's in China. Yes, Chinese red. Happy New Year! It's Chinese New Year coming. Rupa Vilas Prabhu in the Philippines, Dandavat. Chaitanya Nitai Prabhu, Dandavat. Sandeep Krishna Prabhu and family, Maheshwari and Janvi Devi, Dandavat. Malini Didi and Orsk also, Brajalatika, Orsk. We have quite a showing from Orsk. Tapananandini Didi in Mexico, Dandavat. Sankalpa Didi in Shanghai, Dandavat. Shakira in South Africa, Dandavat. Lalita Priya Didi, Dandavat. Adidev Das and Shamala, Dandavat. Pandita, Dandavat Pandita. Soumya Sham Prabhu, again in Orsk. Parmananda Prabhu, I think we need to send you to Orsk. No. Hare Krishna. Soon he will be joining us here in Gupta Govardhan. We're just counting the days.
His animal is ox.
Oh, and this is the year of the cow, Govinda, or ox, as some say. And that's Parmananda Prabhu's year. Hare Krishna.
Water.
And Ajita Krishna Prabhu, Dandavat. Kanupriya Didi, Dandavat. Madhuranan Prabhu, Dandavat. Hare Krishna. Very happy to see you. Gokula Tarini Didi. And Abhazia, Dandavat. Chandrakanti, Hare Krishna. She's in Shenzhen. Hare Yeah, one of those rare moments. And to see the radiance. Jai Madhavilata Didi, Dandavat. Aviram Prabhu, Dandavat. And Nityananda Das, Dandavat. I think, is that everyone? Of course, Sulakshana. Oh, Kamalini Didi, Dandavat. Madhusudan Maharaj, he's in the Swiss Alps. He's doing parikrama in the Swiss Alps, visiting holy places in the San Moritz Mountains, purifying them with his every step. And chanting the name Govinda, Govinda all along the way. Indumukhi Didi, Dandavat, Dandavat. Gaurachandra Prabhu, Dandavat. Hare Krishna. And Huawei made 40p, Dandavat. Rasananda, Dandavat. Kamalini, Dandavat. Sulakshana Didi, Dandavat. All right. Vanchakalpa trivyasta kripa sindhu vevacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Hare Krishna.